Hello, my fellow Voice of the Rings members, and anyone else out there that's ready to learn some stuff about Lord of the Rings Online. This is a LOTRO guide, and I'm your hosting guide, Zalin Ironshield. Alright, you guys, in this quick little episode, I am going to show you guys how to basically distinguish a few things in the trait trees, alright? I'm going to do it from a Guardian perspective. This is going to probably be similar on a couple other people, but every trait tree is a little different in every class by quite a bit, right? It changes up. I could do more, oh hello there, I could do more in-depth things later, but we're going to go ahead and start. My main goal is this: what works and what doesn't work across two different traits. So for example, right, the Keen Blade and the Fighter of Shadow. I must give credit to someone of one of my subscribers and great supporters of Voice of the Rings who pointed this out to me, and I used to know a lot of this stuff a long time ago, and I basically went and did a lot of studying, and well, yes, and did some testing and that kind of stuff, and we figured it out, and now I know exactly what's going on here. So, the main thing is, right, for people who are confused on what I'm even talking about, and if I get a laugh out of you, or you're enjoying this and this helps you, don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. It really helps me out. But anyway, now let's look here at the trait tree. So, for example, this is what we're talking about. Let's look at these top two here. Insult to Injury, right, in the Fighter of Shadow, and Radiant, right? Alright, so what they say is, I'm just going to read the description because it's real tiny for you on screen, right? Alright, so, your damaging area of effect skills have a chance to transfer your debuffs on to an additional targets, right? And this one is, your damaging attacks have a chance to renew all debuffs on your target. Now here's the thing, someone commented to me and asked, well, that doesn't work with your bleeds, right? From a Keen Blade. Well, here's something we have to think about. So yes, that is true. I believe there is when I did my testing, here's what I need to point out. Debuffs and bleeds are very different in Lord of the Rings Online in one way. They kind of seem like they're the same thing, but when you classify it, when you put a bleed on an enemy unit or raid boss, it's called a wound, right? Versus something that's a reduction in their stats, right? I think that's how Standing Stone, this is my experience, I think that's how Standing Stone will use their terminologies, right? Terminology, that's right. So when it says it extends debuffs or transfers debuffs for your AoE skills, right? It won't be doing that with bleeds, right? It won't do that with bleeds because they're wounds. They're not technically debuffs. They're bleeds. They're bleeding, right? Now, realistically, just from the word dictionary, a debuff, you know, being stabbed in the freaking stomach and bleeding out could technically be like a debuff. But when it comes to video game logic, guys, and in Standing Stone's logic of this, it's a wound. It's not a debuff. So, again, for example, now you're saying, well, what does this help you with the Fighter of Shadow, right? Well, the War Chant ability, when you roar, it does a negative 5% damage debuff, right? Because it's a debuff, it's not a wound. This will get transferred and get extended how long from these two abilities in the Fighter of Shadow. Now you could be asking yourself, but what about Stagger, right? Stagger, it's the ability down here, right? And it's one that's, it just does debuff all the time. When behind a target, you reduce their movement speed by 25% and their attack duration by 15% for 15 seconds. If you critical hit with it, it also does the same thing as it's like being behind the target, right? So, everything I tested, it does not seem like these two abilities from Fighter of Shadow extend this ability. Now, I'm going to show you why, okay? I'm going to respec. Watch, my abilities are all going to change, right? Alright, so when I spec into Yellow Tree, technically this is still here, the Stagger. So my thing is, since this is an ability you have, whether or not you're spec'd into a particular tree as a Guardian, right, or as another class possibly, I need to test other classes, so don't, well, I can do, if you got a specific class you want me to tell you and test, I will do that. Just let me know in the comments. But basically the biggest thing that I want to talk about is the rate. So now that we know, basically we know these two abilities, even though it does not per se say it, right? It only works with Fighter of Shadow debuffs, I believe, from what I've tested. Because it does not look like these two abilities up here at the top will extend the Stagger or put it onto more targets. And that also could be the fact that Stagger is designed to hit one target. And maybe in their minds they think it'd be a little too overpowered if you could AoE 7 targets with Sweeping Cut with your legendary weapon or your Tree Treat, and then suddenly have a negative 25% run speed and 15% attack duration on all the mobs. Now, do I think that's OP? Not really, when you're doing a raid. right? Like, I actually think that would be a nice little buff for Guardians. Come on, Sandy Cones, you see this? Yeah, you guys should do that. You should totally make it where those two work with Stagger, right? But anyway, so that is kind of basically what I'm going to talk about, you guys, with these two particular abilities. So what do they work on? What do they not work on? What they work on is they work on your debuff War Chant. I believe they would also work on this other... Ooh, do we have... I don't know. I don't think there's any more direct debuffs in the Fighter of Shadow Tree. But again, they're still decent to have because of War Chant. Now, again, some people have asked me too, like, well, why don't you just go down to like more Tenderize stacks? Well, when I spec, here's the problem, right? When I spec, and I want to have all my points in the Keen Blade, right? Or let's say we could even put some over here into, you know, Chance the Sting. I don't use Sting very much, though. A lot of people don't, right? But you can get a lot of finesse off it, right? When you use it. So that could be a good one to put some points in. Again, another thing you have to realize. So, for example, like Heal Modifier, right? That'll just work no matter what, across all your trait trees, right? This one, Tenderize. It gives you parrying an attack, will provide critical chance, and expires out of combat if you're out of combat for 9 seconds. But it gives you just critical chance. That will work across all your trees because it's giving you a flat stat. The only reason with these two I want to make clear in this video is the wording, right? The wording says your damaging attacks have a chance to renew all debuffs, and debuffs are considered a debuff. They're not considered a wound. They're not considered other things. And again, it doesn't seem to work on Stagger, even though technically I would consider that's a debuff. So, and it could be because they just think it's one target and they don't want it to be something. And maybe because it has criterias of it has to be behind the target or it has to critical strike, right? But then you could say, well, what if you critical strike to trade the debuffs, right? I'm getting tongue-tied. I still believe the wording matters, right? How they're doing that. Now, again, you could say, well, why doesn't Standing Stone give more definition on the skill? Like, description about that within the trait trees. I think that would be good. And it was really hard because I did a lot of studying on the LOTRO wiki, and I still didn't really see much about this. I saw a lot of problems where they were talking about this back in like 6 years ago, but they've obviously fixed things since then. So, oh, you know what? I just realized I'm speccing. No wonder it won't do my points. I'm speccing in the Keen Fighter. So, by the way, another thing you guys have to remember, and I have a trait video on trait tree panels if you want to check that out for basic just doing your traits. Whatever you're specced in, so I'm in the Keen Blade, it only costs 1 point for everything, right? So I'm just going to fill them all up, right? Fill them up, fill them up, fill them up. I just like to put all my points because I pretty much use all of these in Red Tree. There are some things I could sacrifice to put into other points, but now I have 29 available points left right after that. So when I put points into these, I really don't want the healing modifier as much, even though it is good. And I actually do like having these because I like to use it on War Chant. So, because it's still good. So, but the thing is too, a lot of people are like, why don't you put more points in Tenderize? And that's a very good question. And I would totally 100% agree with them. But see, the reason is I get War Chant, and then I get my numbers of additional debuffs, and now I can get points in Tenderize. But unfortunately, I am 1 point short, and I could probably go earn another point. I'm trying to remember what the max points are you can earn right now. Think. Okay, there are 98. I remembered. There are 98, you guys, that you can have. So I have a little work to do actually on my character here. And you can only use at one time, according to the wiki that I just checked, 95 points. All right? So technically I could have another big chunk and I could finish Tenderize, and then I could do a couple more things, maybe get a couple more here, or, you know, I could also use some to get some points into the blue tree, because yes, you can trait in all 3 trees. But again, when you're not traded into that direct tree, it costs 2 points per thing, right? Because look at that, right? So I have 7, see? It costs 2 for each one, versus this one, that if I remove this one, it only costs 1, right? Because I'm traded in the Keen Blade, right? All right, well, I hope that helped you guys out a little bit. I think that was a good point. That was, I did a lot of practicing and studying on that, and testing on different mobs for like an hour to make sure I was not giving you bad info on that. But really, there wasn't a lot of info online about this, so I thought it'd be something good for you guys all to know. And thank you for the people who gave me a shout out and asked that question, because it was a fantastic question and it made me really think, because I used to know this stuff a little more a couple years back, but you know, things get rusty after 5, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, lots of years. You know, you get the point. get the point. But anyway, thanks again, you guys. I appreciate everyone watching. Thank you again to my Patreons, and I appreciate you guys a lot. You're all the best. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe, you guys. You share with your friends. Check out our main playlist of LOTRO Tale. It'll be right up here in the corner. And then right here, we'll have the next playlist over there. And then the subscribe button's right there. And you guys are all awesome. And I will see you in the next episode of Voice of the Rings. See you guys.